What's going on? And there's so much going on now. We're so glad that you are here because we are so happy to present today our Chief of Police, and he's going to be introduced later. I know you all know Chief Anderson, but we're going to formally introduce him. Again, though, that song, we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. And I hope this is a step towards bringing some understanding. So I'm going to begin by bringing up Commissioner Patricia Manley, who's just getting herself together, and she is going to deliver the formal welcome for you. It's so good to have you all here. Thank you for coming. Commissioner Manley.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second annual Memorial Social Justice Symposium. My name is Patricia Manley, and I am honored to serve as a commissioner on the Ann Arbor Independent Community Police Oversight Commission. Thank you all for being here tonight as we continue this important community conversation centered on justice, accountability, equity, and public trust. I would first like to acknowledge and thank the City of Ann Arbor for its ongoing support of this symposium and for its commitment to meaningful community engagement. So to the City of Ann Arbor. I also want to recognize the leadership of the Ann Arbor Police Department for their willingness to collaborate in these important discussions and partnerships that strengthen our community. So thank you to the Ann Arbor Police Department. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge my fellow commissioners who are with us this evening. Would you all stand? Commissioners, please stand. Thank you for your service, dedication, and continued commitment to independent oversight and public accountability. The work we do is strengthened by the diverse perspectives and experiences each commissioner brings to the table. For those in attendance who may not be familiar with the commission, the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission exists to help foster transparency, accountability, and constructive dialogue between the community and the law enforcement. We are currently looking for engaged community members who care deeply about Ann Arbor and who want to help shape the future of public safety and community trust. If you are interested and would want to consider public service, I encourage you to consider applying to become a commissioner. There is some flyers out there on the table too that hopefully you picked up. It is a meaningful opportunity to contribute directly to important conversations and public work impacting our community. Commissioners also have opportunities for professional development and national engagement, including attending the annual National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, and with registration and attendance costs covered for the commissioners. It is an incredible opportunity to learn from oversight professionals and community leaders from across the country while bringing valuable insights back to Ann Arbor. Additionally, commissioners work collaboratively with the Ann Arbor Police Department leadership and community stakeholders on initiatives aimed at strengthening accountability and public trust. Tonight's symposium continues our commitment to learning, dialogue, and action. We are grateful to everyone who has joined us to be part of this important event. Thank you for your attendance. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our Vice Chair, Mohammed Othman, who will introduce this evening's presenter. Thank you and enjoy the program.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mohammed Othman, and I have the privilege of serving as Vice Chair of the Ann Arbor Independent Community Police Oversight Commission. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the second annual Memorial Social Justice Symposium. It's now my honor to introduce tonight's featured presenter, Ann Arbor Police Chief Andre Anderson. Chief Anderson brings more than 3 decades of law enforcement experience to his role as a Chief of Police for the City of Ann Arbor. Throughout his distinguished career, he has been recognized for his leadership in community engagement, public safety innovation, and building trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Prior to joining Ann Arbor, Chief Anderson served in leadership positions with several major law enforcement agencies, including the Tempe Police Department in Arizona, where he developed a national reputation for collaborative policing and community-centered public safety strategies. Chief Anderson has proudly served the City of Ann Arbor since 2024, leading the department through important conversations surrounding the accountability, transparency, public trust, and evolving approaches to modern policing. This evening, Chief Anderson will share reflections on his experiences during and following the Ferguson, Missouri protest in 2014-2015 after the death of Michael Brown. His presentation will also explore the broader history of protest movements and their continuing impact on communities like Ann Arbor today. Chief Anderson's willingness to engage in honest dialogue and share lessons learned from critical moments in our nation's history reflects the spirit and purpose of this symposium, fostering understanding, reflection, meaningful community conversations. Please join me in standing and welcoming Ann Arbor Police Chief Andrew Anderson.
All right, let's see if I can get this thing back in the sleeve here. How's that? There you go. All right, well, I'm honored to be here, and I want to dive into some things, but I want to acknowledge some of our special guests here. Obviously, we had an opportunity to hear from our incoming chair, Commissioner Mohammed, we're really pleased to see that he's going to carry that proud tradition that we have with ICPOC. But also, we have a commissioner that is outgoing. I call her Mother ICPOC is the name that I call her. Chair Carter, you have been, as I indicated, the acronym, the STAR, which means to me savvy, and not spelled correctly either. Approachable, right? Also amazing. I put 2 A's in there, right? Respectable. And so you have been our STAR, and you have We love you. We really do. You know, we have a number of other people, and I hope I don't forget the other names. You know, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge, I mean, we all have our ICPOC leaders here, but we have Councilmember Harrison who's here. Thank you for being here, Councilmember Harrison, who's our leader. And also, we have the amazing, the best city manager, city administrator in the country. I'm not just saying that, that's said abroad. We're very pleased to have him. Mr. Milton Mahoney is here. And also our deputy city administrator, the number 2 of the city. I always call her the number 2. When she walks around and says, I point at her and say, there go to number 2, right there, that's number 2, right? So we have Mariah Waldens here, so as well. And then I think we have Congresswoman Debbie Dingell's representative here, which is Georgia Frost. She may be here as well. So thank you for being here, Georgia. Nice to see you. And my Delta sisters are here. The Deltas, oh man, them Deltas are bad, man. Look at them. Well, I tell you, man. So, without going there, I know just sororities and fraternities. We'll get Commander Dunlap happy over there with our NAACP president is here. Dre is here. Andre won't. Is it? So Andre Watson is a good man, good man. All right, so I wrote a couple things before we start into this, and I'm gonna open up with just talking about a choice, and the choice that you've heard said is that it is not between violence, it is nonviolence, but between nonviolence there is non-existence. Violence only brings about temporary victories. Violence creates more social problems than it solves. It never brings permanent peace, says Dr. Martin Luther King. And so today, as we talk about activism and recognizing activists, Martin Luther King was an activist, wasn't he? Rosetta Anderson was an activist. That's my mother. Protester, arrested. For what she thought was right, police brutality. She thought that was wrong. And a proud person when I became a police officer to help us change the culture of law enforcement. And so when I open up with this by asking you today, I want you to unpack your historical concerns related to what happened in Ferguson. That's what I'm going to be doing. And I want you to understand that the intent of this conversations to educate. Councilmember Harrison, she always calls me an educator everywhere I go. I'm telling stories and trying to be a historian all the time. She says, she says it all the time. He's always telling these stories. Everybody knows that. I get on my staff's nerves. They're like, he's always telling stories. And then I want us to seek ways to find solutions and know that our historical past, we need to look at it because it requires a commitment to make us understand each other and be better. We need that for us to understand in policing that we have not had a perfect response. We are direct descendants of relatives of those, even those that get in trouble. I always tell the police, those are our relatives, and they do stuff. We need to know that, so those are facts. We're going to talk about some things that I think we had to highly respect the activist voice, as I indicated, by listening and taking action. Because together, the police department, I believe we can create a better response. So as we talk about things, we're going to talk about what transpired in 2014. And it was a population of roughly 20,000 people that lived in Ferguson. It is a city that covers about 6 square miles. The population was 67% black, and it wasn't always that way. And between 2010 and 2014, the city of Ferguson issued 90,000 citations and summons. I want you to think about that. It only got 20,000 people there, and they issued 90,000 summons. They had over 30,000 warrants. There was 21,000 people there, over 30,000 warrants. because of what transpired there, it kind of unraveled a number of concerns related to police contact and created a huge chasm in law enforcement. It was magnified by the shooting death of Mike Brown Jr. on August 9th, 2014. Hence, there was a great deal of civil unrest, as you've probably seen. It marked widespread rioting, vandalism, looting, arsoning, gunfire. You know, the protests went on for 375 days there, and we're going to talk about that. But, you know, I was called to ease tension at Ferguson. Now, I believe from what they told me, it was based on my experience with race reconciliation. You know, Ferguson had only had 3 black employees in their leadership. I grew up in an organization where there was only 3 black employees and was able to ascend up the ranks and get to an executive level. And I had a number of different assignments where I had the homicide unit, officer-involved shootings, which you encounter, you know, white officers shooting black people and being able to investigate, and then using community engagement as a way to address those issues. I also grew up in a similar community. You know, I talk to people a lot about, you know, where I grew up. You know, I'm originally from Philadelphia. You know, I like to tell my city administrator it's the home of the best football team. I know you all don't agree. He's rolling his eyes back there. I know the brother, I get it, but you know, I'm just built like that. And so I had humble circumstances growing up in the housing projects with my mother. She did a great job. And, you know, that's some of the pedigree that I thought helped me get there. But I was really called for a single mission. And that mission was to stop the violent protests. It was to keep protests from happening globally because of what transpired in 2014. They had some challenges with the chief there, so they asked someone else to come in. And while I was in Glendale, one of the things that I worked at special events where we, you know, I've helped to manage the Super Bowl. And as you know, the Super Bowl is the largest venue in the world. And so if you understand how to manage a Super Bowl, is what I told people, is that, you know, a large-scale protest is a special event. And so if you understand those dynamics, which require you to be collaborative, work with people, decisive, you'll be able to manage it. But it also called for me to not only manage there, but I was called to Rochester, New York, because they had protests there that was pretty devastating. And the results of me being in both locations led to a blueprint that was used across the country, quite frankly. People call me all over the place. You know, in Ferguson, what it led to at the end of when I was there, it led to no protesters were injured, 0, when they had to protest the large-scale protest for the grand jury. No police officers were injured, 0. No damage of property. Nothing happened while there was large-scale protests amongst us. And I will, as we go through this, I'm going to explain to you how that happened because, you know, I've always told people, many police officers that kind of thought that they can control the community and protest. And I always say, you can't control this community. They will overwhelm you. You can't do that. You think you can do that? That's not going to happen. We have to work with the community. And so with that being said, you'll see me look back and forth a little bit because I want to see where I'm at on the slides. But if we can go to the next slide, got my man back there, Chris Page. So I think we're going to go to the video, Chris, because what I want to do today as I end is I'm going to present to you Ferguson lessons learned. And I want to start off with a video so you can hear what I went into and see.
On August 9th, Michael Brown was shot and killed by police officer Darren Wilson. Within minutes, various accounts of the incident began appearing on social media, accounts filled with speculation and little, if any, solid, accurate information. Almost immediately, neighbors began gathering and anger began growing because of the various descriptions of what had happened and because of the underlying tension between the police department and a significant part of the neighborhood. The duty of the grand jury is to separate fact from fiction. That After a full...
We're anxiously waiting to find out if we will have an indictment on Darren Wilson or an indictment on our democracy. Anticipating disappointment. I'm a black man in America. America always disappoints me.
After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
I can't talk. I came here. You guys, help me out. Well, we love you, son.
They kill us every day, get away with it. They've been preparing for 4 or 5 months for war. We just rolled past Target. They got 2 tanks, and it was police pumping their guns at us and shit. That means they ready for war. A black man get killed in the street, now for the straight turn to a war against black people.
We just heard it. There's no indictment for Darren Wilson. What was once a calm situation is really lighting up.
Shut it down! Shut it down!
You are in the middle of the street. You are lawfully assembled. You will be subject to arrest. Stop trying to turn over the police vehicle immediately.
Things heated up pretty quickly. A cop car was flipped over, several windows were smashed. Right now the police are giving a dispersal order.
That's minor to a death, to us losing somebody 18 years old. Them losing a police car, that's minor, man. They just need to feel all pain. This don't have nothing to do with right now. This about years and years of this, man. That's all we want to say.
You know, when you look at that, it's pretty sobering. You know, when I sought to try to look at something that captured what, you know, Ferguson was all about, it was really just that last statement. I mean, we saw all the devastation, but while I was there, my efforts to try to explain to people what transpired was to really talk about the people really talking about the shooting, what happened with Mike Brown. And a lot of us talk about that. But what I try to get people to understand is that was sad and really bad, but it wasn't really about that. It wasn't about that. It was clearly about years and years of historical concerns that have been happening with respect to this community and people of color. And so I want to walk us down the timeline with Mike Brown. And then I'll kind of reiterate some of this as we go forward. So when we look at before this occurred, obviously there were some issues and practices, as I indicated. We talked about the number of historical stops that took place that not only was taking place in Ferguson, but they were taking place in close proximity. Now, what people don't know about Ferguson is that Ferguson was considered a model police department. In fact, a couple years before this took place, they had a survey, and the survey had the police department at an 82% really acceptable level with respect to how they treated people in the community, 82%. And so when I got there, I started talking about things like this survey, and I was like, you know, who are you surveying? You got this percentage here. Who are you really talking to? Because that's really critical with respect to how we look at things. And when I first got there, you know, I started off, the first thing I did was, I went there, I wasn't in uniform, I did that here. And I went around and talked to people, and who do you think I talked to? Unhoused people. I talked to the unhoused people, you know why? They were gonna tell me the truth. And there wasn't any games there. I went to Walmart, because that's where people will start talking to you. They don't know you. And I started asking them questions about the police department and the culture. And people started telling me the truth about what was happening. So I kind of got an idea. And for the most part, any person that knows me, you know, if I'm going into an agency, I like do a lot of research. I mean, my police employees are like, yeah, I do a lot of research. I ask a lot of questions. And I did that when I was coming there. And, you know, this might sound like a different statement, but we're in the right place for this. I remember a few ladies came out while I was speaking to a unhoused woman there. Of course, there's a guy standing there talking to the unhoused woman that's there, and they want to know why. Why are you talking to this person? And, you know, the women came over, they was coming from a fitness center, and they said, you're asking a lot of questions. Are you the media? I said, no. They said, you think you know the answer? I said, I think I know the answer. They said, you think you know the answer to solve the problem here? I said, I do. They said, that's interesting. What is it? And I told them the answer. Simple answer, tough to deal with. Solution, Christ, period. That's it. You accept that, make changes, you're done. We're not going to have these problems. But we can't do that. So since we can't live through agape love, then we're going to have problems. So I'm going to be here to try to help resolve some of them. And some of us become a vessel to do that. So as we just talked about, you know, what transpired with Mike Brown as we looked through the protests, and without going through everything, you can see that there was violence that erupted from the entire time that I was there. And so as we move to the next slide, we can see clearly that, you know, on March 16th, you know, you can read, it talked about, March 10th, 1916. There's a statement up there that talks about, will not submit to the segregation laws. And it talks about the historical concerns. It says, Negroes determined to fight until unjust ordinances are wiped off. Now, just think about that. This has been occurring longer than 1916, but all of these things are building in that community, building. And so when I start talking to people in the community, you can hear the tension and hear and feel the tension. And so I'm going around and talking to folks. I remember meeting with some elderly women at a church. And this is something, you know, it was kind of a shock to me, probably not to you, but being a police officer for a long time, you know, I had to learn a few things, had to break some of my cultures, some of my thought process, because this was unique to me. You know, I got there and I'm thinking, you know, it's interesting. People are really angry with the police. They hate me. 3 days before I got there, I had a picture with me in the Boys and Girls Club with a whole bunch of kids all around me. They loved me. 3 days later, I was there in Ferguson and they hated me. And so I learned a lesson there is like this uniform you wear, you know, it can change. People start to see you differently depending on where you're at, and it's not personal. So when I started speaking to these women about what was taking place, and they were talking about this historical perspective, I got my first lesson. The woman said to me, you know, I have a warrant. I said, well, okay, what do you have a warrant for? She said, some problems with my vehicle. My grandson was driving a vehicle and they got these warrants. I wasn't driving a vehicle, but they put the warrants on me because it's in my name. And I said, oh, okay, that's pretty easy to fix. I said, why don't you go down to the police department and just tell them it wasn't you, right? That was my pragmatic approach. And then women looked at me like, are you kidding me? Are you serious? You're the new chief. You think we're going down there to the Ferguson Police Department and talk to them? They will arrest me. And then they won't listen to me. And then they will they will arrest me for the warrant and re-arrest me over and over again. And the jail down there is in deplorable condition. And so I started listening and I was like, wow, this is really bad. And so I started to learn more about the community and start talking to folks. I was also there developing a plan. And so one of the things that I try to do as I develop a plan is, you know, I try to, you know, here we have a shared vision. So when I got there, what I try to do is I always try to like talk to people and like, okay, what do you think we should do to fix the problem? I mean, I have an idea, but you tell me what you think. And so I started going on a tour and started listening to people like, okay, what's the problem here? Tell me what the problem is. How do we fix it? And, you know, as we go forward, you know, some things resonated with me from just my upbringing. And I can tell you some of the resolve that came at the end as we move forward. It was a simple solution with respect to how you resolve these problems in Ferguson. Number one, you got to get the community involved, right? And so who do you get involved in the community? We got a lot of young black kids that are angry. They are angry on how they're being treated by the police. You start having conversations with grandmothers. You get them grandmothers on board. You start getting the police officers to help them grandmothers. You start showing some authentic conversations with white police officers, having real conversations about what's happening. Be honest, right? Mothers, right? Pastors, right? Many people from the Nation of Islam, other folks that come, I start getting them and bringing them to the table. Let's bring our Muslims, let's bring a whole bunch of people, let's start talking. Because we're going to galvanize an army to stop this from occurring, because this is your community. And so as we talk about what led up to the shooting of Mike Brown Jr., you know, the Department of Justice, as I indicated, had learned about these citations and a number of people arrested. And I'm just going on, you know, black people were twice as likely to be arrested than whites. These are facts. You know, even speaking to some of the officers that didn't look like me, they didn't like it. It's like, you don't have to like it. This is history. You need to understand it. This is real. People are upset about this. You need to join them. You need to be upset too. And so we talked about that. We talked about, you know, the fear that people had in the community and the city officials allowing some of these things to happen. Don't think this wasn't just the police department. Let me be honest with you here now. It wasn't just the police department. There was a lot of city leaders that were allowed. And when their protests went down and those cops was on the ground, none of them was standing out there with them. None of them, all of them, they sanctioned a lot of that. They weren't standing out there with them. Right? So this took a whole community and a change, not only just in police leadership, but it also takes a change in city government, which, you know, you're seeing it cultivate here in our department in the city of Ann Arbor with the people we have carrying professional leaders that we have, many in this room, because if they're not like that and they start to advocate as they did there with the police department and bringing a police chief and other people that start causing harm in the community, and you don't have good, strong city council members and a good mayor, that's a problem. And they did not have that. So as we move on, I want to kind of walk you through a video so we can show you what happened, because people really don't know what happened as it relates to what the investigation said. So Chris, can you show the video of what actually happened so we can walk through it?
Racism has shaped the urban geography of many American cities. St. Louis is both anomalous and exemplary of this phenomenon. After emancipation, freed slaves were confined to small patches of land in the core of St. Louis City. More and more black families moved into the city during the Great Migration, and racial zoning laws and later racial covenants ensured their continued segregation. In the 1950s, St. Louis became one of the first cities to experiment in high-rise public housing like Pruitt-Igoe. But decades of neglect and the widespread failure of low-income housing followed. Waves of recession and the flight of its manufacturing base further led to decline. St. Louis City imploded, losing much of its population to the suburbs.
The result today: a dense, over-concentrated central core. In a ring around this core, deterioration, overuse, blight. Surrounding this, the better residential area. And beyond this, the green suburb.
White families fled in droves to North St. Louis County, where they formed subdivisions that quickly incorporated into small, whites-only municipalities.
One suburb, Blackjack, Missouri, has kept low-cost housing out.
Tiny Blackjack incorporated itself as a city last August and promptly passed a zoning law prohibiting the construction of new apartment buildings.
St. Louis City was powerless to stop the flight of whites to the county. And unlike every other major American city, St. Louis could not by law annex the rapidly urbanizing areas at its edges. And so over time, small independent municipalities formed around the city. This fractured political system created 90 municipalities, more than 60 police forces, 81 municipal courts, and a justice system that inherited the structural racism of its past. Some municipalities, like Beverly Hills, are less than half a square mile in area. Others have populations less than 100 people.
There are places in St. Louis County where you can see 3 city halls from standing on a corner. Every block or 2 blocks, there's a new municipality, and that municipality has its own police force, and it has its own court.
If I make a right out of my neighborhood, I can drive through 8 different towns in a span of 3 miles.
One of the consequences of that is very easy to get tickets in multiple different places.
So if I'm driving an older car, I might get stopped by 8 different police departments. I could potentially be fined by 8 different communities. You're driving through the gauntlet.
Familiar? Not happening anymore, right? Nowhere. I mean, just look at our metropolitan area right here, in fact, and see how many small cities are relatively close to Detroit. We know why people of color migrated to these communities, right? There was opportunities. That's what we all want. We all want opportunities, and then we start creating these subdivisions and zoning ordinances. And you may have to ask yourself, did that happen here? Be honest, right? We need to speak truth to that. It has. I have the receipts to show it, right here in Ann Arbor and other communities. When I talk about getting leaders in place that can make adjustments to how we look at housing, right? Creating a vibrant community, a city administrator that finds us to bring in businesses and opportunities for us to grow. But at the same time, a leadership that allows for us to be able to still create an equitable way so everybody can live comfortably. You just can't be one community that's just representing just the most elite. People need to afford to live in a great community like Ann Arbor, and when they're here, they need to be treated respectfully by the police. They don't need to be stopped all the time. You get council members, they create a driving equality ordinance and things of that nature. You wonder why. Some people do. I do. I understand it. You understand it? Some of the police officers didn't understand that. And I get it because their view is they want to address crime. But who are we harming with some of these issues? Some of the facts that we had since we had the driving equality ordinance that we've had here, we issued, obviously, the ordinance, and we put in a policy to address some of the harmful acts that was occurring from driving. And what we were told is that if we're not able to stop people for these minor offenses, we're going to have a whole bunch of accidents and things of that nature. And there's not many cities in America that incorporated the ordinance that we have here. We did that May 20th of last year. Today is the 19th. We've had 0 fatalities in 1 year since we put that ordinance in place. We stopped us. And I think the commission is here, obviously Human Rights Commission. ICPOC was great supporters and pusher for it. I would not be able to do that. I mean, it's not me. It's just I had to, I speak to my boss. And, hey, you're aware of this? Yeah, okay. This is why I'm here, right? Yeah, okay, it's time. Okay, in our structure, the city council members communicate, direct the city administrator. I don't work for them. But I work for the city administrator, and the city administrator gives direction to me. Now I have to have a respectful city administrator that works in concert with him. He doesn't just bully me around. He tries to get me to be a Dallas Cowboy fan, but I ain't doing it. I ain't gonna do that. But that's how we were able to make some changes. So as we move forward, let's talk about some of the changes that we have, and if we can go to the next slide. So as you know, some of these punitive actions that the police have done that we've earned. Now, this is not to say that there aren't people that commit crimes that we address. I'm a huge proponent of that. I mean, I'm a police chief. I'm going to always advocate for victims and people that harm victims. And it's not always solved through people going to jail, but sometimes that evening it's solved. And so, you know, it takes a collaborative group of us to figure out the next steps and root issues to people's concerns. But when we have these punitive issues that enforce gentrification, as we've had, as we talked about here in San Francisco, and sometimes we crack down on petty offense. The view is we'll crack down on all these petty offense, and the petty offense will prevent crime. We'll stop all these people from minor offenses, and that'll stop fatalities. Is that true? I mean, sometimes what I'm saying as we look at things, I've always been a study of policing. I mean, again, people that know me, they'll hear me, I'll give them a history lesson on policing. I talk about policing, and I know where policing started. I know where the first police department started in Boston and what we did and the Sir Robert Peel principles, and I can go into all of those things because that's my field of study. I'm a teacher. I have a master's degree in education and leadership. I teach. But, as I tell people, I don't study American policing. I study abroad. And so when we're looking at whether these crimes and things will work, we're looking at the UK and how they see the root of issues and concerns. And violence is important, but it's down here. All these other factors that lead to people's violence are up in the forefront because that's where the real concerns are at. And so what has impacted us, as you can see, it has a quote here, hence punitive, quality of life, zero tolerance policies have been the norm for many departments. And people have really gotten confused with this zero tolerance. I hear people that say, oh, we don't like zero tolerance. Zero tolerance is a policing strategy that came from Kansas City that had to do with domestic violence. It did not have anything to do with the police going around and saying there's zero tolerance. And I hate that term, zero tolerance, to be honest. Zero tolerance equate to a certain community like they had in Ferguson, a certain neighborhood. I grew up in housing projects like everybody. My mom was a very nice person, and we lived in a clean home. My mom wasn't out there committing no crimes, So, those are the things I looked at. Like, we can't just go out here and just have zero tolerance and rouse up everybody and start getting people in jail and putting criminal records on them and starting to create this vicious cycle of policing, saying you're in a gang because you're hanging around somebody you grew up with and wore a Batman suit and now you're in a gang with them. Yeah, I live in the same neighborhood with them. We gonna hang out together. So those punitive problems to talk about, and then we look at it in San Francisco, they made 19,069 arrests. This was during that same time. Half of them were for misdemeanors, most of them for misdemeanor arrests. And in the public. Now, I'm not gonna tell you that the Ann Arbor Police Department is perfect, because we're not. Because as I tell people all the time, we are doing something special here in change. And change has a slow digestive system. It doesn't just change overnight. It takes some time. And so we have to cultivate the leaders. First, the leaders at the top, our department, they're bringing in leaders, and then we're filtering down. We're carefully determining and vetting the people we put in leadership positions in order for them to make a change. And it has to be about this change as far as I'm concerned, as far as I'm here. You have to buy in 100%. You're either in or you're out. You can't be a corner hopper with me. I grew up in the projects. You got to be over here with us or you're out. Can't have that. You got to be there. That's the hood. Got a little hood in me sometimes. And so as we look at the next slide and we talk about some of the optics and we start looking at things, right? For those of you like myself, you've seen this machine. Now, maybe you got 20/20 vision. I don't know. Dale, you got 20/20 vision back there? You ain't got 20/20? You go to readers every now and again? I never seen you wear those. What? Mary, you got the 20/20 back there, Mary? Mary got the, geez, my goodness. Mary's got the 20/20. I haven't had the 20/20 since I was probably like 6 years old. And so we're used to, many of you used to this, and what I ask people when they're looking through it, the doctor always they ask you this question: does it look better like this? How's that look? That's what they ask you. Or like this. You look better? And then they'll go back and say, does it look better like this? Or which one? The next one? Right? So that's the lens of the community. But how about this? How's this look? That look good to you? How's that look? Is that a little better? Right? Or let's take a look at the next slide. Okay, what about that? Right? How's that look? Because those are optics, right? And maybe we go to the next slide. How's this look? Yeah, you see that again? Yeah, how's that look? Right? This is reality. We're looking at optics. And then we go to the next one. This won't look any better because that's what we had at Ferguson. That's what we had. How's that look? That look pretty good, right? So we know as we go to the next slide that the problem that we had as we generate these types of looks at people is we create layers and layers of distrust. As you can see, the woman in the photo there, she got her arms folded. She likely don't trust the police. Probably don't trust the government. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Because why? You see the layers. Historical biases that we learn. Cultivate them from the people we're around. We generate these biases. They're historical. We have unfair municipal court practices. I mean, the courts allow for the Ferguson Police Department to actually gain money, tons of money, off of the community members' back, many of them black. That's how they made that money. It became a business. You come in our community, we're going to pull you over and give you a ticket. And if you live in our community, we're going to give you a ticket. And many of the times that municipal system was so unfair that they would literally lose the tickets and citation and warrants that they had for people. That's what the woman told me. That's what the Department of Justice study said. When I got there and started asking questions, it was true. Right? And then so what that does is it starts to erode trust. We lose trust. But how about this? We take a look at other things. These are optics. How's those optics look? Right? We're over here, y'all over there. We're over here, y'all over there. Now, I'm not saying that there's times when the police have to take a stance from time to time, right? But it really depends on what you take. But how about this next optic? You see that optic? I was there when that took place. I was there. That wasn't a good look. I was there. I was on the ground with the police officers there. So, people were like, well, the chief is not normally there on the ground, right? Why do you think I was there on the ground? Because I knew they weren't going to gas him. That's the 100% reason why. Because I was like, y'all ain't gassing me. Because if you gas me, you're getting fired. And so, I'm like down there, I made it very clear. We have an agreement with the protesters. You protest, we don't gas. You do things, you don't tear things up, you don't create violence, then we don't take other measures. But it just don't stop there, because that's just one thing. We have to implement practices and procedures and start making changes. People not just standing out there for no reason. People will have a reason. You just got to be more than we're just going to protest. We're protesting for a reason. And so we have to stand in solidarity. So as we go to this, we understand that perceptions are your own. We all have perceptions, interpretations, or impressions, or opinions, or beliefs that can be factored in the way we think. But our own beliefs, right, or our own traumas, they really have a great deal on how we think. We got trauma. I got trauma. You got trauma? Some of us need help. We need therapists. This is trauma, right? Things start happening to you, you start remembering, right? It's like, this is trauma. There's community members who were traumatized by the police department. traumatized. And so as we look at some of the things that take place, you can see that there's some historical events that I have here. And, you know, many of us understand this, but when I'm talking to the police officers and other people, they you know, I want them to think about this. I mean, you know, what really sticks out to me is you know, you got people walking around saying, I'm a man. You know, I got to remind you that I'm a man when you can look right at me, clearly you think that I'm a man. You know what that means, right? We have to train people. Like, that means you can't, like, I'm somebody, right? We know that because we saw what the evolution of what transpired there when we had Black Lives Matter there. And some of the things that was occurring. And I didn't always agree with everybody that was on that movement. Didn't always agree because they're people. You don't always agree with people. And if people says, yeah, the Black Lives Matter, I'm like, yeah. But if people say they don't, why? You know, why do people say that all lives matter? Well, all lives do matter. But then I would ask, you know, well, it's not a statement, it's a question. That's the thing that I would say to people that look at it, it's a question. Do they matter? Do Black Lives matter? So some of my counterparts are like, we don't agree. Like, okay, then let me ask you a question. And if you tell me they don't matter, then okay, I know where you're at. Because nobody in their right mind is going to believe you or agree with you. And so getting people to understand this is more than just, I am a man. Do Black Lives matter? This is a statement that's a reminder that we don't feel like our lives matter. We don't feel like we're being treated with respect. You know, trying to bring those thought processes into people and the way they think is really critical. In fact, it is one of the key components when you look at crime and violence. And we're missing that when we get young people that are involved in all this violence. We're missing like some of these basic things. Like I said, you know what solve problems? Respect. These young people don't feel like they're respected, and they don't feel respected. And so when somebody disrespects them, then they act out in violence. It's all about respect. You know, you're an old head. You can't disrespect them. You know, now to feel disrespected, the nurses at school. I mean, wow, you gotta be kidding me. The nurses at school, man, people love the nurses at school. You know, the teachers are disrespecting me. You stepped on my shoes. You did this. You did that. And people have gotten to a point where respect seems to be, people feel like that's a reason for them to cause issue, right? But we understand that. But respect means more when I start talking about how we view things. You know this, as I speak to people about this protest and how we move, right? It's like I tell police officers all the time, it's common sense. Look at it. People, when somebody tells you they believe something, believe them. Right? They'll tell me I can run you down the whole thing that happened to Mike Brown Jr. and everything, and you can come up with all kind of rationale to say that he did it. You can come out with all kinds of rationale to say he didn't. But you ain't gonna get his mom to believe that he did something wrong. And you could talk to her all day long, every day. It's not going to happen. And so when we look at these things, right, what happens when people believe things? They die for their beliefs. They stand out sometimes in Ferguson. I say, what's the weather going to be like? You know, I say that here often, but I get disappointed. You know, deputy city administrator, she ruins my, she's like, you ain't out of the water yet. Like last week, I thought we good. She's like, nope, it's gonna be cold next week. I'm like, geez, man, when is it gonna stop getting cold? I say that every year. And so I would say, man, if it's really cold out here, we may not have as many problems. But people, no, that ain't work. That did not work. People were ready, prepared, dressed. People believed. And when you sit face to face, what I tell a police officer and other people, when you're standing in front of somebody that really believes you did something wrong, they may be willing to die for what they believe. So your whole mindset as a police officer has to change. And think about, this person could be this violent person. Maybe we need to take a step back, dial this down, try to figure out how we can modify our approach to deal with people that believe that they've been harmed. And it's not going to work by meeting them with friction. Not going to work. You need an intervention sometimes, right? So that's what we're talking about. We need the police, need people that are non-police standing with us in order to be the gap, to be the bridge. We can't do it. That's part of community policing, is admitting we can't do it. So as we move on, that's some of the things that you'll hear me give a few jewels. I talked to our people. We went out there and searched for an 82-year-old man for 50 hours and couldn't find him. The police department. And our officers did a fantastic job. They were caring. They were out there. You should see them. They were putting up plans. They were great. And I said, we're not going to find him. He's alive, but we ain't going to find him. We need to get the community involved. And we get the community involved and find it. We get some 6'7" man that can see over the oleanders as he's walking. He sees them. And we only got one person on our department. I think, Petaley, how many people we got over 6'7"? One person? We only got one. We only got one. So, you know, but there's a lot of people in the community, right? They're walking this dog, Dolly, you know, other people in the community. People was happy. It was 200 people. We just asked them, will you help us? Ask them. Will you help? Yeah, we'll help. We can do things you cannot do. They can help us solve issues. But I want you to look at this next video because I want you to really pay attention to what was happening because it's going to explain some things with respect to what transpired in Ferguson, and I want us to have a conversation about it. Can you roll the next video?
The result of this fractured municipal system is a dystopian police state where outstanding warrants for nonviolent offenses can outnumber the population, and where the justice system operates at a profit.
In St. Louis County, there are 440,000 outstanding arrest warrants for minor offenses. That's 9 times more than Cook County in Illinois, Chicago.
In 2013, Ferguson issued 10,000 more arrest warrants than it had citizens. As is the case in Jennings, the poorest areas of St. Louis County are the focus of these aggressive warrants for ordinance violations. In February 2015, a class action lawsuit was filed against the municipalities of Ferguson and Jennings. In the lawsuit, plaintiffs describe being kept in overcrowded cells with walls smeared with mucus, blood, and feces. These plaintiffs are held for weeks, with no change of clothes until their court dates, where they have to appear before a judge reeking in their own filth from time spent in jail. It's shocking humiliation, and yet the system continues to grind the poor through its revolving doors.
If you look in our newspapers over the last year, 3 people have hanged themselves in these jails. There are 3 people who killed themselves, and each one of them killed themselves while waiting to be moved from one jail to another.
Staggering. You know, I have a different version of this presentation when I'm talking to the police officers. And when I get to this part, this is about the time when I ask them, would you protest? Would you? And as the police officers, they're like, we wouldn't. Like, would you? If you had a relative in this situation, would you? And many of them are like, yeah, probably would. I get it. We just want you to get it. Because this was true. I went down there and saw those jails, and I couldn't believe it. I brought my wife down there so she can look at the jail. And, you know, my wife gets angry when she sees stuff like this. You know, she grew up in the South, Memphis. She gets real angry. And so she's like, this is unbelievable. And so for me to start creating some reform with respect to what they were doing there, just realizing that people are in these jails under these deplorable conditions. And I think it was my staff. I think it was the day, now you understand, I told my staff, I'm out a lot at night. They would tell you I'm out. I'm sending emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm out. And I'm like, you think I just started being like that? I've been like that for the last 20 years. And my kids are like that too. And, I told him a story about this one individual that was causing harm in the community for a protester. And he arrested a woman for having an open container, meaning she had alcohol. And she was in the public. And she was outside of her house with a glass of wine. And he worked for me in Ferguson. And the Department of Justice was telling me about him. And I said to him, Eddie, you arrest that woman for having a glass of wine? And he said, yeah, it was illegal. I said, Eddie, my wife ate a glass of wine and walked across the street to the neighbor's house. You arrest my wife? It's a crime. I said, you know what, Eddie, where I'm at in Arizona, you arrest my wife for walking across the street, I'm going to complain on you every day. I'm going to be your worst nightmare. I'm going to be calling, I'm going to be an activist, I'm going to be a protester, and I'm going to go back and tell all the cops that I work with how you treated them, and I don't think it's going to work out well for you. Because over there where I work, we don't do that stuff. And so when you get that myopic view, my whole point in that is just seeing how people think. And talking to our police officers on a regular basis about the myopic view. Like, and I said, people heard me say, I know our commissioner, she said, hey, we hired a chief because he said something that resonated with her, and, it's just talked about just having compassion, right? And, you just can't just go out and just arrest everybody, right? The term that she used, that you remember I said, was the term grace. Is that right? That's right. Kept the term grace. I said, police officers, we don't have grace. Community members have grace for the cops. They're not perfect. They make mistakes. They do things they shouldn't be doing. They're young, some of them. Some things are not right. They're not good. We got to teach them. We got to train them. We got to hold them accountable. And tell them, if I don't have grace for my officers, they're not going to have grace for you. You got to teach grace. I'm not going to let them get away with everything, but I'm going to have some grace. My employees know that. I always tell them, have grace. But this gentleman out there making these types of arrests, right? I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so that's the kind of culture that you have when people do things. And the Department of Justice was talking to me about that very same employee. And me having to explain to him, you can't just go out here and do stuff like that because you can and ruin somebody's life and get them in jail and have a record. That's ridiculous. And so, as you can see, these revolving door of people coming in. And when I started off by saying I was out late at night, and I told my people today, now you probably get the message. You can see it, right? I said, I used to go every day before I left work. I used to walk into jail every day. That evening, I would go, leave, and walk to jail. And every single person in Ferguson that died, that was shot, or injured severely, every single one of them while I was there, I went to the hospital with the pastor every time. Pastor was assigned to me. And I would go down there and talk to him. Let me tell you a quick story. I said my mother wasn't a criminal. And so I tell you, my mom was a kind of a scammer. And we lived in the projects. And when you lived in the projects, you wasn't allowed to go to school in another community. That community had better school books than we had, right? And so I couldn't go to Catholic school. So my mother decided, I'm not sending you to Catholic school with your cousins because they get arrested. So we need to make sure you don't go over there. So I'm going to send you to this Catholic school. But I live in the projects, so if I make too much money and I report it, that's a problem. So we're going to have fish fries and do all kinds of stuff that she did to make all kinds of little extra money. That's what she did. She made extra money, and she allowed me to go to school. And what she did was she had me memorize the address. She's like, okay, now if anything happens, you gotta say you live here. And I don't know about y'all, even if you went to the hospital, my mom was like, if you get sick, you better be falling on the ground like you dead and screaming and running all over the place because I ain't gotta go to work. You better be dead. Tell them everything. So she had all these stories. I had these stories, and she'd get me on the trolley, like, you tell them you 5 years old, you ain't 6. And every time, and I'm like, and they asked my mom, how old are you, son? I'm 6. My mom was like, oh my God, this boy, I told you to tell him. And so she had my story. And, I remember going to school, and, I'm a young person, and this is a lesson I learned, little kid called me the N-word. Called me the N-word. And I was like, my mom is an activist. This is my opportunity to show my mom, I'm part of the crew. And so I pushed them. And they came and did their investigation. Where you live at? Bartram Village. That's the housing projects. You ain't supposed to go here. I'm like, oh. They called my mom. My mom come up there, and you know the story. My mom was like, you got in a fight because somebody called you the N-word? Are you kidding me? You think this is the first time somebody gonna call you the N-word, and then you went and now you kicked out of the school? And I told you not to tell them you lived in Bartram Village. And so I tell you this story because one day I was at my desk, and my lieutenant came to me and he said, there's a little girl that got hit by a car. And so in Ferguson, when they had an issue, I would always ask this question. What race was the person that was hit, and what race was the driver? Anytime there was a situation, I'd ask, well, what race was the person all the time? Because that would tell me about how much protest I'm gonna have. And they told me the girl was, she was black, and the driver was white, but she's a school teacher. I'm like, okay, that's helpful. And so I went down there, and the little girl was taken to the hospital. And my lieutenant was saying, we have an ordinance against people going to school outside of where they belong. So you figure, here's that trauma, right? Here's that trauma. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. What do you think you're gonna do? Well, we gotta cite her. I said, you gonna cite the mom for that? Yeah, I said, that ain't happening. Well, that's what we're gonna do. I'm like, no, we ain't. You ain't doing that. I said, no, bro, she ain't getting no ticket. That's not happening today. And not gonna happen while I'm here. And I tell you that story because when I went to the hospital with the pastor, the mother was there with the dad. And I never forget this. I go up to the mom, and she's there. And I'm with the pastor, and I said, do you mind if the pastor could pray for you and your daughter? And she said, yeah. She said, sure. And I said to her, I'm not here to arrest you. And she took her hand, put it against her face, banged her head against the wall, and slid down the wall and said, finally, somebody's got it. Finally, somebody gets it. And so as we start looking at, I tell a few things that occurred there. These are the type of things that resonate in the community. You try to do things, I would see people, I've seen people, what you here for? Going to the court. I'm here. I heard you talking to your attorney. Yeah, I'm trying to get some money. How much money you need? This is what, I got you. I'm in police uniform. Don't worry about that. I got you. I take care. I'll help you. Right? We got lots of people like that. And those are the kind of things you do, not because you're looking for attention, but because that's what you want to do, right? And help people. So as we move on, we start looking at why we have these protesters. And some of the things that I train with our folks is that, you saw information in there that talks about, these protests and, what is the cause, where they're occurring, things of that nature. And I look at the French-Irish War, and you talk about, some of the statistics there. And this is kind of a chart that you may not be able to see, but it was during the 1920 to 1921, and it talks about the number of police officers killed. And if you look at some of the attacks that occurred, you can see the total of officers killed in different boroughs and provinces that there are 341. That's a lot of police officers killed. And, we don't want any police officers killed. And we have a lot of violence, so people would pelt me with, yeah, we got a lot of black on black crime. And I was like, have you ever done the statistics on white crime? People commit crimes because they're in commonality. If you live in the same neighborhood with somebody, you're likely to commit crime. Don't come and tell me about no black on black crime. I don't want to hear that. What we need to do is don't try to tell me that only one race is involved in these killing of police officers. Look here, I'm going to show you. I'll take you abroad. I'm going to take you here. I'm going to show you this protest. If you saw the video that I was showing that goes around, it showed the protest that's taking place and that take place in Japan, looting taking place all over Uganda, England, all over. There's protests, right? The people who are killing police officers, that's bad. We don't need that type of violence. But is this about race or is this about government? People are not happy with the government. We're here to serve you. Our job is to make your life better and to keep the police from stepping outside their bounds. We have a lot of power. When you have a lot of power, that comes with a lot of responsibility. My boss has a lot of power. He's a very humble leader. That when you have that type of power, he has a temperament that comes about when he walks around. But he still ain't no punk. And they told us one day, we were at an event, and they said, you need to walk with Milton to get back to the building. I said, I'm not walking with no Milton to get back to no building. I gotta make sure Milton is okay. You need to be worried about what Milton gonna do if somebody try to bother. He gonna defend himself. See, he's a humble man, but we don't want that. We're gonna police officers that have humility and have a great deal of humble swag. As I tell them, you need to have some swag, right? You can't be a punk out here, but you also can't throw your weight around and start to do things, right? You need to have some command presence. And so, as we indicated, I was down there on the ground talking to the protesters all the time. And I like corn. I love corn on the cob. And what the protesters did one time is they told me right across the police station that they were going to roast a pig and they were going to put a police officer's hat on it. And I said, I don't think you should do that. It's going to cause problems. They said, we're going to do it. I said, well, we'll see about that. So I go to my fire period. He gives me some code that tells me that they can't do that. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get them now. I'm going to stop this because this is embarrassing, right? So I'm going to have a real conversation with them. And this gentleman right here was over there. And so I go over there, and they got the pit, and they got the, pig on the pit. And so I'm like, hey, man, you can't do this, man. This is like fueling tension. He said, what I can't do? I said, you can't roast this pig. I got an ordinance. He said, you see any fire in this pit? I said, actually, I don't. He said, well, Chief, you can go back over there because ain't nothing you can do about this. I said, yeah, you got me, man. I said, you got me. By the way, would you like to have some corn? I said, man, I like corn. I said, I'll take some of that corn. It was in aluminum foil. And I took the coil for the corn and aluminum foil. They snapped a picture, Black Lives Matter. Then they posted it, right? Police chief is eating the pig that we roasted about the cops. That's what they did. Put it all out in the community and everything. I was like, I had people from Arizona saying, you went out there and did that to the I said, man, I did not go over there and eat a pig, a piece of pork, and blame the cops, man. I didn't do that. They got me, man. They got me. And so, even though this night was kind of volatile, I remember talking to him, and he just bust up laughing. He's like, and those were the times where you could talk to people in the community, and even me, it's like, all right, man, you got me, bro. You know, but in this night, we're down on there on this ground, and we put together a vibrant plan to help the community and address, and we stopped a lot of the violence. This was on part of the plans that we put in place. And it was getting out there in the community and talking to people and galvanizing an army of people. I would go through the community and I would go to a lot of the local churches. Remember, part of my plan was to work with the churches, and I used to deliver a speech called the Moral Authority. And I would ask the pastors and people like, who has the moral authority? Me? You relegate me? You sure? You want me to do that? I mean, it's a rhetorical question because I'm not called to do that. But if that's what you want me to do, and of course they would say, no, that's not your job. Like, well, whose job? Well, then do your job. And I always tell people to do their job. I'm like, do your job. So this is what I need. Let me tell you what I need. I need you to enable every embodied person that come out here. You don't want us to do things? Bring us out here. You help us solve the problem. That's community policing. You solve the problem. You come out here, we will block off the streets, we will do all these things. You come out, you get people together, you resolve the issue. We get the grandmothers, we get the mothers, right? We start demonstrating to the people in the community and get the police officers. We're gonna go over here and we're gonna help some of these grandmothers in the community, right, with some of the things they need. Some of them need the trash taken out from time to time, police officers. This is not your job, right? Right? But we do some of those things, right? What we call you, Vayner? Yeah, I think even the city leadership is starting to learn who Vayner is. Vayner is like, oh, he's a police officer. Don't get me wrong, Lieutenant Vayner, but he's kind of like a all-purpose guy, you know. He's in the dumpsters. He's the trash. Vayner does it all, man. He just, what you want me to do? He does it all. He's a great leader. And so we galvanize some of those people. Those are some of the things we talked about. And then by the time things happen, you can have conversations with folks. And when you're having conversations, you know, I'm looking for the real authentic leader, not a phony. You know, you can't come down there, these grandmothers will sniff you out in a heartbeat. You come down there with this willy-nilly stuff like, man, it ain't gonna work, bro. They ain't gonna like you, man. You're gonna have to come real, man. You're gonna have to be humble. You have to show them something. You have to do something. Be real authentic about it. And if you can't, then you can't roll with us down there. And so those types of things are working with our community members work. And so as we move to the next thing where we talk about what worked, I kind of mentioned some of these things that worked with stopping the riots and protests, right? Because if you go to the next slide, it was a struggle. And with that struggle required us to do the things that we talked about. So there ain't no big secret to this stuff that happened there. Like people are like, what was the big secret? There ain't no big secret. There ain't no big secret. Community policing. You got to know it. Community policing is close relative, is community engagement. Engage the community, be a community policing. Community policing is not a strategy, it is a philosophy. It is a philosophical approach that permeates the way you think. It's not the number of people you stop or all the foot patrol. That is a component of it. But what do you do when you walk, stop, and talk to people? You have genuine, authentic relationships with people. And when you have genuine, authentic relationships with people, people will tell you, the officers say, oh, I get it. We walk around in the community and then they tell me who commits crimes. No, that's transactional. You don't do that. You walk around the community to get people to know you, and they may tell you who's doing something wrong. And then you had to really then start assessing, well, why are they doing what they're doing? It's real. I know they're doing something wrong, but why? What's leading that person to doing that? And then try to figure out a way to do it. And so the community policing, as we look at, is when you don't do community policing, let's talk about how much it costs. Because when we look at these things, right, we use the relationships being forged and riots. I don't have to read them all. We had in the LA, right? Cost and claims, 775 million, 1.2 billion. You know, I was telling somebody the other day, the future of policing and police chiefs is they need to be risk managers. I mean, all these other skill sets that people think they have, no, you need to be a risk manager. You know, that other school learning, I mean, I've had an opportunity, I've been fortunate, I've worked over every single area of the department, from homicide to, you know, to traffic, to every one of them. But you need to be a risk manager. Those are just things, it's good to know those things. And so when you're a risk manager, you start thinking about, how much is it gonna cost for me to do this? Right? You know what the risk manager is? The risk manager is how much the difference between 28 cents and $5,000. You know what the difference between 28 cents and $5,000? Let me tell you what it is. I owned a vending company. I was younger, young cop. I own vending machines. I go out there, I see a young Vato guy kicking my daggone machine because he didn't get his soda. I go to him like, what you doing, man? He's kicking the machine and giving me the soda. I'm like, hey, get out of here, man. See, I still got cop mentality. I'm not in a cop uniform, but I got cop mentality. And I'm like, you can't kick my machine. That's a crime. You got to get out of here. You're like, it's like that? Like, yeah, it's like that. You ain't going to give me my money? No, man, you kicked the machine, bro. You got to get on out of here. Right? You know what happened the next day when I came back to my machine? Torched that one, and 2 of them in the back. Lesson learned. You know, I just learned that early on. I go to the vending machine, I saw people kicking the machine, 28 cents. Like, what are you doing? Kicking the machine. Why? They give you money. I tell you what, how about I give you a couple cans of soda? You gonna do that? Yeah. And then I'm gonna show you, look in here, I could tell if it's jammed, you know, coin mech is jammed, and it'll tell me if you lost the money. Look, I'll show you, open it up, see? It works, but you know what, that's fine. Which soda you want? That's business. And the police officers learn that. What is the risk? You go out here and start causing problems for people and cost the city a whole bunch of money because you are so prideful. Because your job is so important that you cause the whole city a whole bunch of money and you don't live in the city. You go back home as a disinterested outsider, cause all these problems, then you leave, and then everybody that lives in the community has got to deal with your attitude. Think about that. Does that happen? These are the conversations I have with my employees. We can look down these numbers. I mean, you look at them, you know, you look at Baltimore, what happened there. I mean, $94 million, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, it is costly. And then not only is it costly that the city, who's paying for that? Not the cops, because they're still getting paid. And quite frankly, they're making more money because they're out there a lot dealing with that. And then everybody else has got to pay for that. And then it costs the community and the city a lot of money because nobody don't want to come back when you got a reputation of that kind of stuff and you got to rebuild stuff. We got to get police officers that are smart. We have to train them. In our police academies, we don't teach human rights. Don't teach it. I've been going around talking about that all over the place, like human rights. It's not a right. It's not something you learn. It's yours. It's given to you as you're born. You know, that's a right. Everybody has human rights. And just grasping that concept alone will make you think like, maybe I shouldn't treat this person this way because they actually have rights. If people look at their civil rights, no, forget the civil rights. Let's go to their human rights. You know their human rights, you don't have to worry about civil rights. So we go to our last one. What is this? Historical? Thank you. Are we at historical lessons learned there? Because I can't see it. So we learned some historical things about the historical strain relationship between the St. Louis County and the communities of colors, right? That was that whole county area. You saw that, right? Police department that has, 100 population now. Come on. I mean, how you going to generate any funds to hire your one cop with 100 people there? And what is that police officer going to do? And where you going to get them? Are they going to be an educated police officer? Maybe they are. Perhaps maybe I'm being too judgmental. But you got to have a vibrant community and hire police officers with degrees like we do. You got to have at least 60 credit hours. That's smart. We probably shouldn't hire people unless they're over the age of 26, quite frankly. Because, you have a college degree and you mature, you're less likely to get in trouble. You start having a family and things, you start thinking about it. We tell people, you got kids? Yeah. You probably want to just chill out here, man, because you don't really need no problems. Start teaching our police officers like we're doing about social norms. We tell them, you know what? Over here in Ann Arbor, we don't do that. Over there in that other city, you want to run and gun, do stuff they do in Florida, chase people all over the place, go at it. Community likes that. That's normal. I'm not hating on you. You ain't doing that here. They tell people, that's what we got to teach them, the social norms. You don't have to work here. I'm just your employer. I'm not your dad. I'll tell you what to do. You do what you want, but what you ain't going to do here is you're going to follow our social norms. And so we're going to create the historical relationships. They had delayed in releasing information. It's tough because, there's all these things about releasing information. Sometimes we can't release it as fast as we like because there's legalities. We have unions, we have employees, they have rights, those types of things. And sometimes we can. And so we had to balance that. I know Chair Carter is always talking to me about that. In fact, we gave her our notification process. That was one of the first things the city administrator, that was the first thing, one of the first, I think he told me, you need to come up with a notification protocol. And so that notification protocol, we also have one where when we notify, ICPOC and things of that nature. We have been talking about this for a long time. We gave her a draft of it because couldn't bear let the chair leave, and then I had to have unfinished business on my plate. So I'm like, no, I ain't having that one. I'm gonna get that one out the way. So we gave it to her today. They had a lack of training with respect to procedural justice. Corey Mills teaches a lot on fair and impartial policing, and he also has our, he's teaching on use of force and de-escalation because he has that field. We're doing a lot with constitutional law, and a lot of leadership training here, and teaching people to have organizational courage. We have Mary Ann back there, Mary Ann Frank. She's not a police officer, but she got a heck of a lot of courage, I'll tell you that. And she's an amazing leader in our department. And she does a lot of great things, and she does great things with the courage in terms of how she goes about doing things. And she's flanked by our new commander, who is the future. Great temperament. Commander Dunlap. So they didn't have people like that. I have a flank. I have somebody I can trust. It's right there. You got to have somebody you can trust, that you can talk to, to help you move things forward. And that's not really like trying to get all in your business or take over your job, right? You don't need that. They know how to stay in the back and then wait for their turn to prepare. We got people like that. They had a culture where the officers were expected to demand compliance. I talked about that. They lack the legal authority. Where does legal authority come from? The community, not the police department. You're lacking legal authority. You don't understand. That authority is relegated to you. The police officers, supervisors, the leadership rarely responded to civilian complaints. People complain, they didn't care. You complain, they don't care. They don't respond. You can't respond to citizens' complaints. You're not responding to your customers. That don't mean unlike the adage that all businesses is the customer is always right. Don't work like that in the police department. Customer ain't always right. Sometimes the customer is wrong. But we had to be honest when we tell people that, no, I can't agree with you. And then as we look through our organizational culture, we had to look at the paradigm. The organizational culture is an institutional structure. We talk about making sure we have interpersonal beliefs and looking at police officers that have upbringing. So I'm toying with this leadership concept as I move across the country, and I'm working to get to where I'm talking about You know, and you're a police chief, you come in and you do an autopsy of the organization. But I'm talking about what you do as a PET scan. And that PET scan, if you all know about a PET scan, right, what can a PET scan? It can find all kinds of injuries you have, but what it can do is identify cancer. I'm a cancer survivor. And so when you have that PET scan, right, you see that organization and that cancer, you know what you find out? Be honest, you got cancer all over your department. You got cancer. And how do you deal with that in an organization when you want to cultivate organizational change, right? Right? You have to do what? You have to treat the cancer, isolate the cancer, or remove the cancer. So my employees, they heard me say, I know I talked to Brandon, he talked to me, he's like, what do you do about that stuff? I said, you know what, my friend once told me, he said, when you're the chief, like you're like in this island, and all these people are, you know, you got these, you know, people up on the island with you, and you got these lions, and the lions are coming up there, and my friend said, all you need to do is throw them a little chicken every now and again, and then you get a lion a chicken, and then they'll leave you alone. And this was actually my mentor telling me this. And I said to him, Tom, when the lion gets hungry, he's coming back again, right? He said, yeah. I said, Tom, why don't we just kill the lion so we can all eat and we ain't got to worry about the lion coming up the hill no more? He's like, you know what? That makes sense. And so, you know, that organizational cancer stuff is important because what we have to look at is that people have to have credibility and respect for their boss, you know. And I try to model that with me. I have a boss where, you know, I'm direct with them. I'm straight up with them. I give them a hard time sometimes, openly and publicly. But I'm gonna follow them. I believe in them. I trust them. You gotta have people around, but you gotta be trustworthy. I'm not gonna trust them if he's a fool. So you gotta be trustworthy, and you gotta have people like that. And we talk about that. And you gotta be loyal to the absence. You know, people there, and figure out where you're going. So when we look at the policing differences, we look at what needed to be done. As I indicated, here are the strategies that we try to employ here. We're not the best at it. We're doing the best we can, but we're starting to be recognized all across the nation for what we're doing in Ann Arbor. And it's because the foundation was there in the police officers that were here before me. Some people may have had some negative experience with the police officers, and it is true. And if you've been on this earth long enough, over 20 years you've been around, the policing 10, 15 years ago was bad. And there were still some really good cops. We had some really good cops. We had Andrew Stevenson back there. He's a sergeant with our department. His dad, for my research, was really known on the west side. People loved him. He's a great cop out there. So when we went to get somebody in community engagement, I went and met with him at night. Right, Andrew? I said, that dad is in there somewhere, isn't he? Right? I said, is that dad in here? He's like, yeah. I said, we need that dad coming out. And so now he's our community engagement person. So we look for people that have that. You know, sometimes it's an impediment that we got to go through rules to hire people. You know, sometimes I don't like that. You know, I'm more like the CEO guy. I like to just this is the guy, this is the lady. You know, but I can't do that. So what I have to do is just develop people to get the right people. And you give people a chance because they'll surprise you. Sometimes people won't look like the right person and they'll end up being the right person. And so we look at these types of training that we have on this race reconciliation, which happens a lot of times. Me and Jeanette, who's back there, Lieutenant Jeanette, we talk a lot about race. It's very vulnerable. Hey, so I didn't grow up around black people. I grew up in Detroit. I had to work in Detroit. That was a tough transition for me. I had to learn. And then when I learned, I started seeing all the harm that was occurring. And then I started making adjustments in the community. And so I'm like, yep, do you really believe that? Yeah. I said, I'm going to watch and see. And so I've seen that in him. And so then we go and start having real conversations. Let's talk about race. This is going to be people I told her the day I got hired, I'm going to talk about race. That day. I said, I'm going to talk about race. I do. Sometimes it bothers people, right? I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just trying to keep it real. We need to talk about this stuff. And so as we get ready to end, you know, the Department of Justice findings came to the police officers were forging all this revenue based on a pattern of unconstitutional policing. They inflicted unnecessary harm. The revenue was about productivity through citations. The courts exasperated the biases and stereotypes. The police chief was urged to generate and increase revenue. And I met Tom Jackson while I was out there. I understood where he was coming from, his culture. I mean, he came from a narcotics background. And so when you come from a narcotics background and you become a chief, you think that everything you do is about revenue. You arrest people, you take their drugs and their money, and that's how you do things. I get it. I work narcotics. You know what? But you're not a narcotics agent. You're a police chief. And that was in your glory days. Those days are over. And you gotta make a change. And so although I could relate to him, I understood where he was coming from. I still didn't agree. So the police sworn were told that it was important to have revenue. And who was telling them that? Some of the people in city governor telling them that. So they're following suit. And at the end of that, the police take the hit. They follow the direction of the leadership. And like I said, the police take the hit. And they're on the line. You know how tough that is for some young 20-something-year-old to come to me and say, hey, Chief, let me see if I get this right. You want me to stand out here and you want me to get pelted by these protesters? And he said, I'm 20, I just got here. They hate me. I haven't done anything to them. They're calling me names. They're doing all these things. And for me to sit there and say, you'll be a police officer. You're gonna get this job. You're gonna have scrutiny. People ain't gonna like you. Not everybody's gonna be your friend. This is a tough job. You come in here, right? It's tough. But you need to be America's finest out there and do the right thing to protect people. And this is what I can tell you. If you get out there on that line and you lose your temper, I'm not going to be able to save you. Nobody. You see what's out there? CNN, MSNBC. Everybody is going to watch. They're going to see you. They're going to be looking for your temperament. We got to think long term. We just stand here and try to do what we can to hold the line, right? And then you get behind the scenes and you start identifying people that may not have liked you and you try to change them. So the last thing I would say before I go to this last video is that what happened there was about all the things I talked about, but the most important thing that I tell people, I tell my police officer this, and I tell people this in general. They ask, what do you want? So I'm gonna tell you what I want. What do you want? You know what I want? I want your heart. That's what I want. You don't care about all that other stuff. I want your heart. I want you to be a good person. That's what's important. You have a good heart, you're a good person, that's all I want. You don't need to know all the rules, the policies. People that know them are generally people that get in a lot of trouble. Some of the best cops I know, they don't even know none of the policies. There's no bus on you, Brandon, because your job is to know the policies. You're the CLIA manager, you need to know them policies. And he does. But that's all we want. We want a good heart. That's what I want. If your heart is in the right place and you do the right thing and you make a mistake, you'll get grace. If you keep going out there and doing the wrong thing, you need to choose another profession. Do something you like to do. Do something that you have a passion for, but you can't be here. And so you take this last one, and I believe, Corey, do you have questions? Okay. Let's look at this last part, and then we'll bring Corey up. I think are we way beyond the time? No. We are. He said yes. No. The commissioner, she says no. I'm listening to the boss. Corey, we're going to end that. Just show this last video, please. We took it out? All right. Well, I'll tell you what it was about. It was really this simple. It was listening to Martin Luther King saying, all he knows is to be true to the paper. And paper tells you that people have the right to protest for dignity. That's American culture. And so we may not like it. There's a lot of things I don't like. I tell people, oh, I don't like it, but I'm going to do it. Maybe probably said that to my boss a couple times, like, I don't know if I like this, but all right, got to do it. And then just do it. And we know that that is what that was about, is just understanding, being true to the paper. Corey?
Thank you so very much, Chief Anderson. And just like you see him, that's the way that he is working with our police department. And this is how the community helps. Let me tell you this. We had at the commission a lot of complaints. They say, why don't the police have to tell you why they stop you when they stop you in a traffic stop? And so we went to the chief, and we said, Chief, the community wants to know why they can't be told why they're stopped. And he implemented new policy. Now, Ann Arbor police officers, when they stop you, they introduce themselves, and they tell you why you've been stopped. So that's how the community fits into this whole thing. And we just appreciate you so very much, Chief Anderson. Thank you. And the person that you are to really change the culture. And we're going to present you with a ICPOC mug. Thank you very much. And I believe there are some questions. Commissioner Liu, are you ready? Commissioner Liu is going to come forward, and while she's coming, let me just thank Commissioner Roderick Green for allowing us to use his beautiful church here for this meeting. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Erica, and once again, if you have any question cards that are filled out, please hold them up in the air for Lieutenant Mills to collect. Thank you all again for joining us this evening. Before we begin our Q&A, we would like to thank Chief Anderson again for sharing his time, experiences, and insights with us tonight. We appreciate his thoughtful presentation and willingness to engage in important conversations surrounding protest history, policing, and community relations. We will now move into the Q&A portion of the program. Due to time limitations, we will only be addressing questions that were submitted either before or during tonight's presentation. We received a number of thoughtful submissions, and while we may not be able to get to every question this evening, any unanswered questions will receive follow-up responses after this event. We also ask for your understanding as we work to cover as many questions as possible within the limited time we have remaining. Thank you again for your participation and engagement tonight. Lieutenant Mills.
Thank you. All right, there we go. All right. All right, on behalf of the Ann Arbor Police Department, thank you all for coming out. I've heard some of these stories, but I still learn from this presentation. So really good information. I hope it gives you a broader way to think about things when you see it on TV. And certainly, Chief Anderson brings a lot of experience here, and we're very fortunate to have him here. So thank you for coming out. All right. So this is a question. How do you change the culture of policing? People don't become police to love. The kind of people who become police are a particular type. Can you change them? Jeanette? come up here and answer that question.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Jeanette. I'm the night shift weekday patrol lieutenant. I think there's not really an easy answer to this question. Well, there definitely certainly is a archetype that become or want to be police officers. I do think there are people that come into the job that do have a love for people and helping. So what we need to do is, when we do find that in employees, foster it, use it as an example to maybe employees that don't have the right mindset. As the chief said, we have to, if they don't have the mindset, you either change your mindset or you can't be here. I can't speak for all of policing, but if we start here and try to grow that out, we all have connections in other agencies, we lead the right way, I think that's how you get people on the right track. And if they can't, then they have to leave. Like the chief said, find something that you want to do, but it can't be this. If your core isn't because you care and you love people and you want to help. And that's what we have to emphasize from the day that the person walks into the police academy.
All right, has AAPD considered hosting another police convention that will allow citizen participation again?
Got it?
Oh, yeah. I got this. So our agency is always looking at different ways to bring in people who speak around the country about best practices, procedural justice, fair and impartial policing. A few years back, we had the problem-oriented policing conference that was at the hotel near the Briarwood Mall. We're always looking at different things to bring into the community because, as you've heard, when we share what we do with the community shares what's going on to us, which makes the community safer. So we're always looking for new things to bring in, and we certainly can lean on the community for that information as well. So, we teach, we learn, and the community teaches and the community learns. That's part of our philosophy, community policing. And that's the long answer. The short answer is yes. We're always looking to bring people in to teach us about best practices. I'm sorry? Oh, yeah, you're welcome. All right. Next question is, what is being done for those who have been trapped in these predatory practices for years and years? Change is good. What about retroaction?
Antoine, I want you to tell me about being trapped in the things. Come on up here.
Hello, my name is Antoine Bailey. I'm a resident of Arbor. I've been a resident for maybe like 23, 24 years now. But to answer the question, well, let me just give you a little background. So I moved to Ann Arbor when I was 18 as a college student. Came here to play sports and began to get stopped by the police and have been continued to be stopped by the police over and over and over since I've been 18. And I'm stuck in a trap. I'm 41 now. So being a parent, and I've probably spent about $250,000 between like tickets, impounds, jail fees, and whatever else comes with that. So things that are being done that I can appreciate Council Member Harris with the driver equality ordinance, whereas you're not getting stopped just for being somewhere or looking to type. I appreciate Chief Anderson just for speaking to me and having some compassion as to what I've been going through as a resident here in Ann Arbor for my direction.
Don't go nowhere. That was good.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna do an interview here real quick. 41?
Correct.
How many kids you got?
10.
Okay. 10 kids. You working?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Why you ain't working?
Got into a motorcycle accident.
Okay. What's been happening in your car?
I've been continuing to be stopped by the police whenever I'm somewhere in Ann Arbor, certain parts of the city, or where they think I shouldn't be at, or wherever it is in Washington County.
And what's the reason you getting stopped?
I mean, I feel as if I'm getting stopped for being black and being in the suburbs, in the city that I live in. But once I ask why am I being stopped, it's a lot of things that don't make sense. They might say, hey, you're doing this, you're doing that. But I've never received a ticket for anything that they say that they pulled me over for, ever.
Okay, last two questions. Background, working. Where have you worked? What kind of skill sets you got?
Okay, I went to college. I worked at Ford Motor Company as a quality technician as well as a line worker. I was a supervisor at Best Buy for 6 years prior to my motorcycle accident. I take care of all my children. They in the house with me. No child support, no none of that nonsense. I'm a full-time father, day one dad, no felonies, no none of that. I'm literally getting stopped.
Thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate you.
All right, man, appreciate you.
What can a city like Ann Arbor do to move the bar for justice as a community?
We can help Antoine. We can. That helps move the bar, set a good example. You know, what we can do is, this sounds odd, and sometimes people don't see this, but we need to support the police. We really do. And the support needs, and the police needs to support the community. And it starts with us supporting the community. And so what we can do is we can embrace these innovative strategies that we see in the national practices to reduce harm. I know our council member Harrison is looking at these things, not just reducing harm, but we have a lot of individuals that are going to jail, coming out of jail. We don't want people to go to jail, but when they are there, it's a captive time for us to develop some skills that they can come out and have an opportunity to work. And we can be better by creating opportunities for people to work and get jobs so they can take care of their family. We need to become a model community with respect to how we deal with harm reduction. We need to be a model community with respect to how we deal with mental illness. We need to be a model community with respect to how we're dealing with community policing. But we need your support. And so I think that as we continue to strive in that direction, we will meet that mark. But we need continuity, people working together.
The boss has one more question. How do we move beyond conversations about social justice and create measurable change within our communities?
Social justice and memorable change. I'm going to ask Pretty Petterly to come up here. You're going to know why I call him that when he comes up. And I'm going to ask Commander Dunlap to flank him so they can finalize with this answer. See him?
Was this the question here? Can I reread it? Yeah. So just to read the question again, it's how do we move beyond conversations about social justice and create measurable change within our communities? I think this is something that we're actively doing within our police department, and I feel that Chief Anderson's really been moving that forward. We're moving towards more, like statistical-based things and seeing how what we do has impacts on the community, so that way we can, track these things to move ourselves forward, so that we can, move things and measure and get better, so that we can communicate with the community more transparency, so that we're not just the police department and the community is separate, but we're working together so that we can, move forward and make our community better as a whole.
Great answer there, Lieutenant Petterly. I would just add on that to say, great question, first of all, and we talk about measurable change within this community and our community. We really have to be in tune with the community, and I know there was a time when we did a lot of community surveys, so we start talking about measurable and how we're best serving our community here, and just being in tune with the community and keeping track of these measurables. We have to constantly be reevaluating how we're approaching things, and setting goals is first in that. We have to set a goal that we can measure in the first place, but it's mainly staying in tune with the community. Getting your feedback is crucial to us, and letting us know how we can best serve you. So measuring and meeting that mark is the top priority.
Thank you again to the Police Department and Antoine and Lieutenant Mills for answering the community's questions, and thank you to the community for your participation this evening. As mentioned earlier, if your questions was not answered during tonight's session, follow-up responses will be provided after the event. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Commissioner Haynes, who will provide this evening's closing remarks. And 1 second.
I forgot something.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, thank you all. Thank you, Chief. You can see how he involves his whole leadership team. That's wonderful. Okay, this was supposed to be the ICPOC regular meeting. And we had a featured speaker, but it was still supposed to be a meeting, and all of our meetings count. So I was supposed to call the meeting to order. So I'm going to call the meeting to order now. We have a quorum. And now I'm going to close out the meeting. And, well, if there's nothing further from any of the commissioners, and then Commissioner Haynes is going to close us out, but I'm going to adjourn the meeting following Commissioner Haynes. And I hope that the chief will be around afterwards. Take a cookie home as you leave. Thank you very much, Commissioner Haynes.
My name is Janet Haynes, and I am honored to serve as the commissioner with the Ann Arbor Independent Community Police Oversight Commission. As we conclude tonight's second annual Memorial Social Justice Symposium, I would like to sincerely thank every one of you who joined us this evening. Your presence and your participation helped make tonight's program meaningful and thoughtful and very impactful. We would like to extend our gratitude to the City of Ann Arbor and city officials who continue to support community engagement and dialogue around public safety, accountability, and social justice. We also thank the leadership and members of the Ann Arbor Police Department for their attendance and participation this evening. So thank you guys so very much. To our community organizations, advocacy groups, faith leaders, students, educators, and residents, thank you for showing up, engaging in conversation, and remaining committed to strengthening our community together. Events like this are only possible of collective participation and shared dedication to progress. We would also like to give a very special thank you to Commissioner Roderick Green for graciously allowing tonight's symposium to be held here at his church, New Hope Baptist Church. We truly appreciate the church's hospitality, partnership, and support in helping bring this important event to the community. Now, as we close tonight, we want to remind community members that the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission, that's a lot, ICPOC. ICPOC is who we are, is looking for engaged residents to serve on the commission. Serving as a commissioner is a valuable opportunity to help shape important conversations in Ann Arbor while working collaboratively with community members and the Ann Arbor Police Department. We encourage anyone interested in serving in the community in this capacity to consider applying. And when you came in, there were applications, and also there was our 2025 annual report, ICPOC's 2025 annual report. And in that report, it talks about some of the things that we did in the community, some of the programs that we established or we did, and also the various, what am I trying to say? Also some of the various, help me, committees that we have. So we have a committee on training, we have a committee on reporting and other things. So the annual report would be very helpful for you to read. So at this time, I would like to invite all of the commissioners to come forward. Tonight, we want to take a special moment to recognize and thank Chair Stephanie Carter for her extraordinary leadership, her hard work, and dedication to the commission over the years. After completing 2 full terms on the commission, Stephanie's service is coming to an end. And while we are incredibly grateful for all she has contributed, she will be truly, truly missed. On behalf of the entire commission and the community, we want to thank you for the countless hours, your care, and the compassion and passion you have devoted to this work. Chair Carter, Muhammad. Chair Carter has been instrumental in helping guide and strengthen the commission through her service, her leadership, advocacy, and commitment to transparency and community engagement. Her steady leadership has helped shape many of the important conversations and initiatives that have advanced the commission's mission. Please join me in giving Chair Stephanie Carter a well-deserved round of applause.
Let me just say thank you. It has been my honor to serve, and I'm deeply grateful for this. And did everybody see that's what the chief and the police department got for me. I'm just so happy. I just don't know what to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you again for attending tonight's symposium, and we appreciate your time and your engagement and your commitment to our community, and we wish that you have a safe and wonderful evening. And now,
The meeting is adjourned.